As a kid, what's the creepiest, most WTF thing you ever noticed about another kid's family? When I was in 1st or 2nd grade, I was at a friend's house and forgot to turn off the lights. When I left the bathroom, my friend's dad lost his bonkers. He cussed me out, made me stand in a corner, and wouldn't let me leave until I wrote "I will not forget to turn off the lights" when I leave a room 100 or so times. It was my first and last time going to that friend's house. 2nd grade. I went to a neighbor's day party, ate 2/3 of a hot dog, and tossed the rest. Friend's dad literally made me eat it out of the garbage. Stopped the party, picked it up, handed it to me, got this wild-eyed sneering look on his face, and started screaming about how he worked for that, and I was going to eat it, and respect his hard work, and don't waste it. Yeah, the dude was freaking loaded. He could afford to lose 35 cents worth of chicken toes and pork snouts, but apparently the insult, from an 8-year-old, was too great for him to accept. Man, screw that guy. He passed that poop on to his kids too. They were all insanely status conscious, constantly buying new poop. Whenever our family did, we kids built a rickety treehouse out of 2x4s. They hired a bunch of day laborers to build a house on stilts for their kids. We got chickens. They hired day laborers to build a picturesque chicken coop. We got a computer. They did. We got a Nintendo. They got Super Nintendo. I didn't realize people like that actually existed, but they totally do. I noticed that all of the rooms in this kid's house could only be locked from the outside of the room. I thought that only existed in horror movies. I didn't know, until I was 17, that the fact that my parents installed a lock on my bedroom that could only be opened from the outside was unusual. That's a serious issue if there ever were to be a fire. I just realized I was given the room at the end of the narrow hallway, farthest from any exits. You just realized your parents wanted you dead. Happy cake day. Not really creepy, but definitely WTF worthy. I was friends with a girl growing up, and she didn't come from a very clean home. All the time there were clothes in huge piles all over her bathroom floor. Okay, whatever. But for some unknown reason no one in her family ever flushed the toilet. They would sit, poop, and just go on with their life. Every once in a while, when the bowl got too full, someone would just try to flush, thus resulting in week old and piss pouring out in the floor all over this laundry. 9 times out of 10 they would kick around these clothes then just leave the scene. They constantly bought new clothes. The worst thing, this was all just completely normal to them. If it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, just let that mellow too. This one has a happy ending. My dad was a contractor, and I made friends with one of his employees' sons because we'd always end up on the job site with our dads. The first time I slept over at his house, I got there after dark. The house was a giant 1-room log cabin. The kid had like 5 siblings and all their bedrooms were just sectioned off with walls made of clotheslines and sheets. Even the bathroom didn't have walls. It was just this massive structure with a maze of hanging sheets everywhere. It made me really uncomfortable that night. Fast forward to the next morning, when we go outside to play. We walk out the back door, and there's a giant mansion in the backyard. Actually, it was more like this cabin was in the front yard of a mansion. Turns out the dad had bought the land and built a cabin for the family to live in temporarily while he built their dream home. He gave every member of the family some awesome feature in their new room, and it remains one of the coolest, most unique homes I've ever been in. We're all still friends to this day, and I would describe them as the most loving family that I know. When I was about 12 to 13, I had this friend who lived in a house with her mother and 4 other sisters. One day I went to her place while on my period and ended up using her washroom to change my tampon. I put the used one in the garbage can, which had a lid completely wrapped up in toilet paper. Later in the night, right before dinner, we are all sitting at the table waiting for their mother when we suddenly all hear her screaming from the bathroom, "Who has their period? Who used a tampon?" She came rushing down and all the sisters denied having this. I ended up sheepishly coming clean, to which she said, "And your mother lets you use tampons? Don't you know what that does to your body?" She then proceeded to make a hold in a conversation out of why tampons are horrible for me and why they've ruined my purity forever, and bragged about how her daughters would never use anything so primitive. Needless to say, I never went there ever again. I thought it was so weird and WTF why, because the only way she would have seen my used tampon is if she had actually gone through the garbage looking for something incriminating. The thing is, that's totally something this woman would do to try and find something to yell at her daughters about. I feel so bad for people who grow up with such controlling, monstrous parents. Shudder. When I was about 11 to 12 I had a friend that lived in a really big house in my neighborhood. We were never allowed to go to her house, outside or inside. One day, we were riding bikes and I fell right near her house and I insisted we get a napkin from her house to clean the blood. She was really weird about it. I only went into the kitchen and there was a door that was closed. She opened it and yelled that I was in the house. Her mom came in. She was a very pretty woman and was wearing a silk robe. She told us to hurry up and then sent us on our way. About 3 months later they were in the news for running an illegal escort service out of their home. Both of her parents went to jail and my friend was sent to Florida to live with her grandma. I can't imagine what her life was like during that time or afterwards. Neighbor kid took out a stick of butter and started dipping it into a canister of Kool-Aid. After licking all the mix off the butter he repeated it over and over as if it was that fun dip candy. It skeeved me out and I declined his generosity when he offered me the Kool-Aid and the butter. His older sisters were there and they said they do this all the time. It's great. Dear God. That sounds like some sort of honey boo boo delicacy. Went to a friend's house and could hardly breathe when I stepped through the front door. They had like 20 dogs/cats and would just let them piss and poop anywhere in the house. The smell of ammonia was so strong I could barely breathe. It was so bad that all the floorboards were just soaked with urine and were rotted. I used to hang out with a kid whose family not only didn't have a litter box for the cat, but wouldn't pick up the cat poop either. The only reason I went over there was because he had an Atari 2600. I always came home with cat poop on the bottom of my shoes. Doesn't matter, played Atari. So this isn't nearly as WTF as other stories on this thread, but I always find it really sad that my neighbor's dad sat on his lawnmower from dawn to dusk, so he didn't have to deal with his family. And now you know why some super old dudes don't retire. Ever. I stayed at this girl's house on a school night for whatever reason, and we all had to take a bath. They told me to go first, but I was playing with this girl's only toy, a globe, and said I'd go last. Little did I know they all use the same freaking bath water. There were like 5 kids and 2 adults. They all 7 of them, took a bath in the same water. I got pushed to the end of the line, and when my turn was up, the water was brown. I mean, no longer transparent. I cried and they called my mom and then ran me new bath water. It would appear that they were really poor, but no. Her dad was an orthopedic surgeon. WTF. A surgeon who has that low of standards for cleanliness. That is very unsettling. I'm sure he washes his hands thoroughly before surgery, in the same bowl of water as the last 10 surgeries. When I was 8 I took a trip for a month to Alabama to visit my friend and his family. His parents were extremely Catholic and had very strong on contraceptives. One day while I was there, we took a family trip to the grocery store and poked holes in condom boxes. I didn't realize what is had until years later. I still feel really bad about it. TL. Doctor friend's family made me poke holes in condoms. Jokes on them, they were facilitating abortion instead.